I'm Erica, 35, and Christmas dinner was supposed to be a warm family gathering. Instead, it turned into a battlefield. Picture this. My parents, their faces twisted with anger, shouting in unison, "We don't have a child like you," right in front of everyone. My heart pounded, tears stung my eyes, and in that moment I snapped. I did something so bold it left the whole table speechless, wine glasses trembling, and the holiday in chaos. Growing up, I always felt like the odd one out, never good enough for their perfect expectations. That night, their words cut deeper than ever, pushing me to a breaking point I didn't know I had. What did I do to shock them all? Stick around to find out how one dinner changed everything. If you've ever faced family who tried to tear you down, drop your story in the comments. Smash that like button and subscribe to see how I took my life back. Growing up in Salem, Oregon, our house looked perfect from the outside, but inside, it was a constant struggle. My mother, Sharon Larson, a retired elementary school teacher, ran our family like a classroom demanding perfection. My father, Charles Larson, a retired banker, followed her lead, rarely challenging her. My sister, Monica Larson, a surgeon 3 years my senior, was their pride and joy, always excelling in ways I never could. I was the odd one out chasing stories instead of stability. From a young age, I loved writing. At 10, I scribbled my first short story about a girl escaping a haunted forest. I showed it to Mom expecting praise. Instead, she skimmed it and said, "This is a nice hobby, Erica, but it won't get you anywhere." Dad nodded silently, his eyes on his newspaper. Monica, meanwhile, was winning science fairs and getting straight A's, her achievements plastered on the fridge like trophies. My stories. They stayed hidden in my desk drawer. By high school, the gap widened. Monica aced her SATs and got into a top pre-med program. I spent hours in the library reading novels and drafting my own. When I won a local writing contest at 16, I thought Mom might finally be proud. She wasn't. "Writing won't pay the bills," she said, tossing my certificate aside. Dad just shrugged, as if my dreams were a phase I'd outgrow. Monica smirked, saying, "Maybe you should try something practical like me." It wasn't just about my career choice. Mom and Dad had a vision of the perfect daughter, married, successful, polished. Monica fit that mold with her husband, Michael Thompson, a businessman, and their daughter, Brooklyn Thompson, a bright 9-year-old who loved my stories. Brooklyn was my light in those dark years. She'd sneak into my room begging for new tales about dragons or pirates. I'd read to her giggles, making me forget Mom's sharp words for a while. But even Brooklyn couldn't shield me from the constant comparisons. At family dinners, Mom would gush about Monica's latest surgery or Michael's business deals, while my freelance writing gigs were met with silence or a dismissive, "That's nice, dear." Dad might ask about my work, but only to point out how unstable it was compared to Monica's career. I learned to bite my tongue, swallowing the hurt, but each jab built a resentment I didn't know how to shake. My best friend Tara Mitchell, a journalist, saw it all. She'd listen as I vented over coffee, her sharp wit cutting through my frustration. "Your parents are stuck in their own world," she'd say. "You're not Monica, and that's your strength." Tara's words kept me going, especially when I started dating Bryce Carter, an editor who believed in my writing. He'd read my drafts, offering feedback that made me feel seen. But no amount of support could erase the sting of my family's disapproval. By my 30s, I'd built a modest career publishing short stories in local magazines. Still, every visit home was a reminder of my place in the Larson hierarchy. Mom's lectures about real jobs never stopped, and Dad's quiet agreement hurt just as much. Monica, now a celebrated surgeon, seemed to revel in her golden status, dropping subtle digs about my little writing hobby. Only Brooklyn's wide-eyed excitement for my stories gave me hope that I wasn't invisible. Looking back, those years of judgment shaped me. I carried the weight of their expectations, always hoping for a moment of acceptance that never came. I didn't know it then, but that tension was building toward a breaking point, one that would change everything. 3 weeks before Christmas, a text from my mom lit up my phone as cold and sharp as a winter wind. Dinner at our house. 6 p.m. Christmas Day. Be there. No warmth. No love. Mom, just an order. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Going back to that house meant facing the same old judgment, the same comparisons to Monica, the same disappointment in my unstable writing career. I wanted to delete the message and pretend it never came, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the faint hope that this time they'd see me for who I was. I decided to make a gift, a short book I'd written, a collection of stories I'd poured my heart into. It wasn't much, just a few tales about courage and chasing dreams bound together with a simple cover. I spent days revising, tweaking every sentence, hoping it might finally earn a nod of approval from Mom. Deep down, I knew it was a long shot. Sharon didn't care for hobbies like mine. Still, I printed the pages, tied them with a ribbon, and told myself it was worth a try. I met Tara for coffee the next day to talk it over. "You're walking into a lion's den," she said, stirring her latte, her eyes narrowing. "Your mom's just going to tear you down again." Tara had seen it, all years of me coming back from family gatherings with a forced smile hiding the sting of Mom's words. She wasn't wrong, but I couldn't back out. "I need to do this," I told her. "Not for them, but for me. To prove I'm not invisible." Tara sighed, leaning back. "You're braver than I am, Erica. But don't let them break you." Later that week, I called Bryce to tell him about the invite. He was at his desk, surrounded by manuscripts, his voice warm through the phone. "Want me to come with you?" he asked. I could picture his steady gaze, the way he always made me feel like my dreams mattered. It was tempting. Having Bryce there might soften the blow of Mom's inevitable criticism. But this was my fight. "No," I said, gripping the phone. "I need to face them alone." He paused, then said, "Okay, but I'm here if you need me. Always." The days ticked by, and I threw myself into preparing the Christmas gift. I edited my book late into the night, each word a small act of defiance. I imagined handing it to Mom, her actually reading it, maybe even smiling. It was a foolish fantasy, but it kept me going. I also picked out an outfit, nothing flashy, just a sweater and jeans that said I was trying but not too hard. I didn't want to give Mom an easy target. Tara checked in again a few days later, her texts blunt as ever. "Still going to that dinner," she wrote. I replied, "Yup. Book's done. Ready to face the firing squad." She sent back a laughing emoji but added, "Call me after. You'll need a drink." I smiled at that. Tara always knew how to pull me out of my head. As Christmas approached, my nerves grew sharper. I kept picturing Mom's pinched expression, her voice cutting through the holiday cheer. I knew she'd have something to say about my book, my clothes, my life, but I also felt a spark of resolve. This wasn't about winning their approval anymore. It was about standing my ground, showing them I was enough, even if they couldn't see it. By the time I packed my book into a gift bag, I wasn't just preparing for a dinner, I was preparing for a showdown. Pulling into my parents' driveway, the Christmas lights seemed more like a warning than a welcome. I clutched the gift bag with my book, my heart thudding as I stepped out of the car. The front door swung open and Mom greeted me with a tight smile. "You're late," she said, eyeing my sweater and jeans. "Couldn't you have dressed up a bit?" I forced a smile, already feeling the familiar sting of her disapproval. Inside, the dining room was set with precision-polished silverware, a golden turkey, and wine glasses gleaming under the chandelier. Dad sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Monica, in a tailored blazer, was chatting with her husband Michael about some business deal. Brooklyn bounced over her eyes, bright. "Aunt Erica, did you bring a new story?" she asked, hugging me. I nodded, handing her the gift bag, but Mom snatched it first. "What's this?" she asked, pulling out my book. She flipped through it, her lips curling. "A bunch of stories. This is your gift." Honestly, Erica, it's not worth the paper it's printed on. My face burned, but I bit my tongue. We sat down and the meal began. Monica launched into a story about her latest surgery, some complex procedure that had her colleagues in awe. It's groundbreaking, she said, her voice loud enough to fill the room. The hospital's already talking about an award. Michael nodded proudly, adding, "She's saving lives while running a tight ship at home." I focused on my plate, feeling smaller with every word. Dad chimed in, "That's our Monica, always making us proud." The pointed silence that followed made it clear I wasn't included in that pride. I tried to join the conversation, mentioning a short story I'd published recently. Mom cut me off. "Writing's fine for fun, Erica, but when are you getting a real job?" she asked, her tone sharp. Dad didn't look up from his turkey, but his silence spoke volumes. Monica smirked, sipping her wine. "Some people just aren't cut out for big things," she said, her words slicing through me. I gripped my fork, my knuckles white, trying to keep my composure. Brooklyn, oblivious to the tension, tugged at my sleeve. "Aunt Erica, tell me about the dragon story in your book," she said, her voice eager. I started to answer, explaining how the dragon guarded a hidden kingdom, but Mom interrupted. "Brooklyn, stop bothering your aunt with that nonsense," she snapped. "Eat your dinner." Brooklyn's face fell, and I felt a surge of anger. "It's not nonsense," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Mom raised an eyebrow. "Don't talk back, Erica. You're a guest here." The air grew heavier as the meal went on. Monica kept boasting, recounting how she'd been invited to speak at a medical conference. "It's a big deal," she said, glancing at me as if daring me to compete. Michael added, "She's basically a celebrity in her field." I wanted to scream that my work mattered too, that my stories reached people in their own way, but the words stuck in my throat. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. "Erica, you should take notes from your sister. She's got her life together." The table went quiet, the weight of his words crushing me. I looked at Brooklyn, her wide eyes watching me, and felt a flicker of strength. She believed in me, even if no one else did. But Mom wasn't done. "You're 35, Erica," she said, setting down her glass. "Still chasing dreams like a teenager. When are you going to grow up?" My chest tightened, the room closing in. Every jab, every comparison, every dismissal piled up, pushing me to the edge. I didn't know it then, but I was moments away from doing something that would change everything. As the Christmas turkey hit the table, the tension felt like it could snap at any moment. The dining room was a pressure cooker, every clink of silverware amplifying the silence between Mom's jabs and Monica's boasts. I sat there, my hands clenched in my lap, trying to hold it together while their words chipped away at me. Mom leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Erica, you're wasting your life on those stories," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "At your age, you should have a stable career, not some childish dream." Dad nodded, cutting into his turkey. "Your mother's right. You need to stop playing around and get serious." Their words landed like punches, each one heavier than the last. I opened my mouth to respond, but Monica cut in, her tone sharp and smug. "Still chasing your little stories? Erica, maybe it's time to admit you're not cut out for it." She leaned back, swirling her wineglass, a smirk playing on her lips. Michael chuckled as if it was all a joke, while Brooklyn looked down at her plate, her small hands fidgeting. I felt my chest tighten, the air growing thin. Years of their criticism, Mom's lectures, Dad's silence, Monica's superiority flooded back, each memory a fresh wound. I tried to focus on Brooklyn's quiet presence, but Mom wasn't done. She set her fork down, her voice rising. "You're an embarrassment, Erica. No husband, no real job, just scribbling nonsense. We don't have a child like you." Dad's voice joined hers, booming across the table. "We don't have a child like you." The words echoed, slicing through the holiday cheer, leaving the room in stunned silence. Something inside me snapped. My vision blurred with tears, but anger burned hotter. I stood my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. My hands trembled as I grabbed the book I'd brought, the one Mom had dismissed as worthless. "You don't get to decide who I am." I shouted, my voice shaking but clear. In one swift motion, I hurled the book onto the table. It landed with a thud, knocking over Monica's wine glass. Red wine splashed across the pristine tablecloth. Plates clattered and Brooklyn gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "I'm done," I yelled, my heart pounding. "I'm done with your judgment, your comparisons, all of it. You don't want a child like me. Fine. You don't have one anymore." The room froze. Brooklyn started to cry, her small sobs cutting through the silence. Monica shot to her feet, her face red with anger. "How dare you ruin this dinner?" she snapped, pointing at the mess. Michael put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Sharon stared at me, her mouth open, while Charles sat rigid, his face pale. I didn't wait for their response. My blood was roaring in my ears, and I couldn't stand another second in that house. I grabbed my coat from the chair, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Brooklyn reached out, her voice trembling. "Aunt Erica, please don't go." My heart broke at her words, but I couldn't stay. I gave her a quick hug, whispering, "I'll see you soon, okay?" Then I turned and walked out the door, slamming behind me. The cold night air hit my face, but it couldn't cool the fire inside me. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Walking out into the snowy Salem night, I felt both shattered and liberated. The cold bit at my face, but it couldn't match the ache in my chest. I'd just walked away from my family, from years of trying to prove myself. My car's engine roared to life, and I drove straight to Tara's apartment, my hands still shaking from the scene I'd left behind. Tara opened her door before I could knock, her face softening when she saw me. "You look like you've been through a war," she said, pulling me inside. Her small living room smelled of coffee and cinnamon, a stark contrast to the sterile tension of my parents' house. I collapsed onto her couch, my coat still on, and let the whole story spill out, Mom's biting words, Monica's smugness the moment I threw my book and declared I was done. Tara listened, her eyes steady, pouring us both a glass of wine. "You did what you had to," she said firmly. "They don't get to define you." I called Bryce next, needing his calm voice to ground me. "I'm at Tara's," I said, my voice cracking. I couldn't take it anymore." He didn't hesitate. "You stood up for yourself, Erica. That took guts." His words felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of guilt. I told him about the wine-stained tablecloth, the shocked faces, and Brooklyn's tears. "I hate that she saw me like that," I admitted. Bryce's voice softened. "She'll understand one day. You showed her what it means to stand tall." As Tara refilled our glasses, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. My stomach knotted, but I answered. "Erica, you need to come back and apologize." He said, his tone clipped. "You disrespected your mother and ruined Christmas." I gripped the phone, my anger flaring anew. "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "I'm done begging for your approval. I'm not coming back." He started to argue, but I hung up, my hands trembling. Tara reached over, squeezing my arm. "You meant that, didn't you?" she asked. I nodded, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. Tara leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Erica, you've spent your whole life chasing their validation. But look at what you've built, your stories, your readers, your life. You don't need them to see it for it to be real." Her words hit hard, peeling back years of self-doubt. I'd always thought I needed Mom's nod or Dad's pride to prove I was enough. But sitting there with Tara's unwavering support, I started to see it differently. My worth wasn't tied to their expectations. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Brooklyn. Her small voice came through, shaky but clear. "Aunt Erica, I read your book," she said. "The dragon story was my favorite. I love how brave the girl was." My throat tightened, tears spilling over. "You really liked it?" I asked. "I love all your stories," she said earnestly. "Don't stop writing, okay?" I promised her I wouldn't, my heart swelling with gratitude. Brooklyn's words, so simple and sincere, were like a balm, soothing the raw edges of the night. By the time I left Tara's, the snow had stopped and the streets were quiet. I drove home replaying Brooklyn's call, Tara's advice, Bryce's encouragement. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of my family's judgment pressing down. I'd walked away, not just from that dinner, but from a lifetime of trying to fit into their mold. It hurt, but it also felt like freedom. Months after that Christmas, I threw myself into my writing, determined to prove them wrong. I poured every ounce of pain and defiance into a novel, a story about a woman breaking free from a family that never saw her worth. Late nights at my desk with coffee gone cold and Bryce's encouraging notes taped to my wall became my sanctuary. By spring, I finished it. A small publisher took a chance on me, and when the book hit shelves, the response stunned me. Readers sent emails sharing how the story resonated with their own struggles. A local critic called it raw and unflinching, and a book club in Portland invited me to speak. For the first time, I felt like my voice mattered. Back in Salem, the fallout from that night rippled through my family. Sharon and Charles hadn't reached out since my father's call demanding an apology. I heard through old neighbors that they'd become quieter, their perfect image tarnished. Whispers spread about the Christmas incident and their standing in the community, once bolstered by charity events and church gatherings, took a hit. Monica, too, pulled away from them, overwhelmed by the pressure to be their golden child. She stopped attending family dinners, focusing instead on her career and Brooklyn. The Larson family, once a pillar of Salem's social scene, was fraying at the edges. I didn't gloat. Their unraveling wasn't my victory. It was just a consequence of their own choices. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but now I was building a life on my terms. Tara, always my anchor, kept me grounded. Over coffee, she'd grin and say, "You're a published author now." What Sharon got to say about that, Bryce, too, was there, every step reading drafts and celebrating each milestone. Their belief in me was a reminder that family isn't always blood, it's the people who lift you up. By the next Christmas, I decided to rewrite the holiday. I hosted a small gathering at my apartment, nothing like the polished dinners at my parents' house. Tara brought her famous pecan pie, Bryce strung fairy lights across my living room, and Brooklyn, who Monica allowed to join us, arrived with a handmade card. "It's for your next book," she said, her eyes sparkling as she handed me a drawing of a dragon. We ate, laughed, and shared stories around a folding table, the warmth of the night filling the holes my family had left. Brooklyn read a chapter from my novel aloud, her voice proud, and I realized this was the kind of Christmas I'd always wanted, one where I was enough. Looking back, I saw the cost of my family's need to control. Sharon and Charles lost both daughters to their rigid expectations, their reputation crumbling under the weight of their own words. Monica, caught in their shadow, drifted into her own isolation. But I found freedom. My worth didn't come from their praise. It came from the stories I told the people who believed in me and the courage to walk away. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you for listening. This story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's felt unseen or unheard. Your value lies in your heart, your dreams, and the people who truly see you. Don't let anyone dim your light. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's your story of breaking free? Share it, because your voice matters too.